Drivers think that knowing the speed limit or checking their mirrors is enough to stay out of trouble. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The rules you've been following for years are changing, and the reality is that most drivers won't even notice until it's too late. I want you to listen carefully because what I'm about to explain isn't just about obeying traffic laws. It's about understanding how the system actually works in real life, the kind of situations no one teaches you about in a driving manual, and the maneuvers that officers use to create uncertainty, stress, and yes, even fear. By the end of this, you're going to know not just what the new laws are, but how to navigate them without handing over power you didn't have to give. The anchor for all of this is a single, simple phrase. I respectfully assert my rights. Repeat it in your mind. Repeat it until it becomes automatic, because in these encounters, it's the difference between control and chaos. Let's start with something most people don't understand. Traffic enforcement isn't just about stopping reckless drivers. It's about controlling the narrative in the moment. Imagine this. You're driving home on a bright, clear afternoon, windows down, music playing, and out of nowhere, flashing lights appear in your rear view. Your heart jumps, your adrenaline spikes, and in that brief window, your brain short-circuits. Officers know exactly how that feels. They know the physiological reaction, the sweaty palms, the rapid heartbeat, the slight tremor in your hands, and they use it to create compliance. This is where the first of the 10 new 2026 driving laws can trip you up. Lawmakers have expanded the definition of distracted driving, now including nearly any interaction with your vehicle that takes your attention even for a split second. Yes, that includes adjusting your GPS or even reaching for a coffee. The difference between a warning and a citation now hinges on your ability to assert calm, coherent control in the middle of a physiological storm. Here's where this gets complicated. The law itself seems simple when you read it on paper. Drivers must maintain full attention to the roadway. But officers on the ground interpret it through human judgment. They're trained to look for hesitation, nervous gestures, subtle movements that suggest distraction. So the moment your hand drifts to your lap to adjust something, or your eyes shift briefly, you could find yourself in the spotlight. Let me be honest with you. There's no perfect formula, but there is a method to maintain control. That's where the phrase, I respectfully assert my rights, becomes your anchor. You're not arguing, you're not confrontational, you are calm, precise, and in command of yourself. Law number 3, which most drivers miss entirely, is the new Stop for Emergency Vehicles rule. Previously, it was a straightforward requirement, pull over to the side. Now, the law has nuanced provisions. If you're in an intersection, if the road is divided, or if there's adjacent traffic making a pullover dangerous, the statute allows certain discretion. But officers often interpret these gray areas against the driver. They're trained to notice what they call micro-decisions. A second too long in an intersection, a slight misalignment when you move over, and those split-second interpretations can escalate a routine stop into a serious infraction. Understanding the nuance is critical because asserting your rights calmly in this moment isn't just legal advice. It's psychological armor. Think of a case I handled last year. My client, let's call him James, was pulled over for what the officer claimed was failure to maintain attention. James had been driving responsibly, but his hand had briefly brushed a coffee cup. The officer immediately escalated, questioning his focus, implying he was obstructing traffic. James's adrenaline spiked. His instinct was to explain, to justify, to talk. That's exactly what the officer anticipated. I coached James through asserting a single, consistent phrase, I respectfully assert my rights. He said it once, calm, unwavering, without explanation. The officer paused, noticed the composure, and the interaction de-escalated. No citation. That's how subtle and critical this approach is. Now, this is the part most people misunderstand. Asserting your rights doesn't mean being difficult. It doesn't mean rolling your eyes, crossing your arms, or raising your voice. Officers respond to control, but not to hostility. Their psychology is straightforward. They are trained to manage unpredictability. If you give them clear, controlled communication, you reduce their need to assert authority against you. Body language matters as much as words. Keep your hands visible, maintain a neutral posture, speak evenly. This is the trap most drivers fall into. They panic, their tone wavers, their body tenses, and suddenly a minor technicality is magnified into a citation. The new laws also touch on electronic surveillance. One of the 2026 updates now permits officers to expand dashcam review to incident proximity zones, essentially meaning that if you're near an accident scene, your driving is subject to scrutiny in ways that weren't standard before. Here's where ambiguity is weaponized. They will ask questions about what you were doing, where you were looking, even your thought process in certain maneuvers. You're trained to think, I can explain this later, but in the moment, explanation can become evidence against you. That's why rehearsing the phrase is essential. You're not being obstructive, you're being prudent. Let's talk about exceptions. Law is rarely absolute. If an officer reasonably believes there's immediate danger, say a pedestrian suddenly enters the street, you must respond as a reasonable driver would, but reasonable is subjective. That's why I respectfully assert my rights works as a framework. It signals that you are aware, compliant within your rights, and not panicking. Even if an officer tries to push beyond legal boundaries, your calm repetition keeps you anchored. Hard truth, asserting rights can feel inconvenient. You might be delayed, your day might be disrupted, you might feel judged by someone in a position of power. But let me be candid, the alternative is far worse. When you surrender control, even subconsciously, you surrender legal leverage. Officers exploit those moments, intentionally or not. Knowing your rights, understanding the law's nuance, and maintaining composure allows you to navigate these scenarios with dignity and, more importantly, with protection from unnecessary penalties. Let's move on to how officers use psychological pressure. They're trained to escalate through verbal and nonverbal cues. Foot tapping, repeated questioning, a slow approach, even the angle at which they shine their flashlight. Adrenaline surges and your cognitive load spikes. This is the human brain under pressure, and it can make rational decision-making almost impossible. But if you've rehearsed your phrase, your mind has a familiar anchor in the storm. That's why I say, over and over, I respectfully assert my rights. It's simple, it's calm, it works. Here's where it turns. Imagine a situation at night, rain, slick roads, a vehicle stops abruptly in front of you. You instinctively brake and swerve slightly to avoid collision. The officer sees this as reckless maneuvering in a newly amended law, and now you are facing scrutiny. Your heart races, your thoughts scatter. This is precisely when a composed assertion of rights is critical. Your body language, your tone, your unwavering calmness, all of it communicates a narrative that you are in control, that you respect the law, and that your adherence is deliberate, not careless. One more layer. The law itself is complex, and ambiguity is intentional in many cases. Definitions like safe distance, reasonable speed, or distracted driving are deliberately flexible. That's because lawmakers recognize that driving isn't always black and white. But the gray areas are where officers have discretion, and where mistakes, misinterpretations, and escalations happen. You cannot change the law in the moment, but you can control how you respond to it. That's why our anchor phrase isn't just words. It's a strategy. It's your lifeline. Finally, what do you do if an officer ignores your assertion? Stay calm. Do not argue. Document later. If a citation is issued, it's not the end of the story. It's a procedural step. The phrase is less about immediate compliance and more about long-term protection. You assert your rights in the moment to maintain control of the encounter, to reduce risk, and to create a record of your awareness and composure. Rehearse it until it's automatic. Let it roll off your tongue like second nature. Because when the adrenaline hits, when the lights flash, when fear creeps in, it will be the words you rely on to anchor yourself. Driving is no longer just a matter of skill or attention. It's a constant negotiation with the law, with human judgment, and with your own physiological reactions. The new 2026 laws add layers of nuance, ambiguity, and risk that most drivers simply do not anticipate. But with preparation, awareness, and the steady repetition of, I respectfully assert my rights, you reclaim control. It's not about confrontation, it's about presence. It's about authority over yourself in the moment when every instinct is screaming to panic. And that, my friends, is the difference between being a driver and being a driver who can navigate the modern legal landscape safely, intelligently, and deliberately.